Hello, everybody joining. We will get started in just a second. It is great to see so many of you here today with us, interested in this important topic. All right, I'm going to get us started and dive in. Heather and Janine will be watching. In case anybody has issues, please don't hesitate to let us know. But we have a jam-packed agenda today, so we're going to dive in and start talking about elevating youth voice in prevention. I want to start by welcoming everybody here. It is amazing to see so many people all across Pennsylvania that are interested in this topic. What we are planning is this is part one of a four-part webinar series that we are going to conduct over the next 4 months, and we'll give you all the registrations towards the end and the dates and everything if you don't have them yet, where we cover this topic sort of in depth. And this will be more than a webinar, and you'll hear me say that several times as we go through this process. Parts of it will be webinar and we'll be giving some information, but parts of it are going to be to help each of your communities craft a plan. And Heather shared that template with you via email earlier. And if for any reason it didn't open or you have any trouble with that, just ask us. Use chat, or we have the Q&A feature enabled this morning, so you should be able to communicate with us that way. In fact, if you have questions as we go through this morning, please feel free to use that Q&A feature because we want to make sure we get to all of your questions. Sometimes they can be missed in the chat, and that'll help us keep track of those and make sure that we're able to answer everybody's questions this morning. And you know how it goes. Sometimes you have a question and then the facilitator covers it on the next slide or two later too. So sometimes those things happen. We have a lot to cover across 4 webinars, so we've broken this up into 4 different parts to try to make it bite-sized pieces for everybody. So I want to start by introducing our team. My name is Jeff Hogan. I know a lot of you on this call. It's great to see you. For those of you that I haven't met before or don't know, I work for EPIS. EPIS is a part of the Prevention Research Center at Penn State University, and Heather, Janine, and I all work there, and we will be your guides through this 4-part webinar series. So if you have any questions or need anything, we'll be the ones that you reach out to. All of us might be sending you things via email, as you saw Heather send the template this morning. Don't hesitate to contact any of us if you have questions. So over the next 4 webinars, we're going to be using that planning template that Heather sent out. So if everybody could take just a few moments now to download that if you haven't, make sure you have it open, probably on a separate screen so that you can be filling that in as we walk through today's webinar. Today in webinar 1, we're going to focus on the first 2 sections of that plan. We're going to define your purpose for youth engagement and decide on an engagement structure that fits your specific community. As we move through each webinar, we'll progressively build out all 7 sections of your plan, including purpose, engagement structure, recruitment strategy, support plan, power sharing, sustainability, and clear next steps. By webinar 4, you'll be leaving with a complete plan ready to implement. Now, I do want to emphasize this is going to be a draft, so this doesn't have to be perfect. As you're with us through these 4 webinars, I just said it's going to be a complete plan when you leave, but think of this as a draft. Don't hesitate to fill things in, even if it needs to get changed later, or there are people back in your community with your coalition or whatever your structure looked like that you need to discuss some of these things further with. Do your best to fill it in as we go through it today, and know that you can change it at any point. This is meant as a tool to help you create your plan. Throughout this series, we're also going to be referencing 2 key resources. The first will be the Prevention Learning Portal with 3 youth engagement courses. We're going to share some information towards the end of today's webinar on how to access those and what each course of those 3 courses that are all free will cover, as well as the YJAB, or Youth Justice Advisory Board Best Practices Toolkit, and other evidence-based frameworks to guide your decisions. So keep your planning template that Heather sent you earlier handy, and if any of you don't have it, please let us know. It should let you use chat, but if not, feel free to use the Q&A feature if you are not able to um, find that template or use it for whatever reason so we can make sure you have a copy of it. And we're going to work through that throughout the next 4 webinars. So our goal is to walk through that template with you through these next 4 months to fill out all of these sections, and you'll leave with something that should be usable for your community. Each session will build on the previous sessions and help to build your your youth voice implementation plan. So I want to call out many participants that are here with us today. I recognize some names and know some of the work that's being done already. Many of you are already working in some way to engage youth. So everybody here today and across these 4 webinars might be starting in a different place, and that's completely okay. This process is meant to help move from intention to structure to sustainability. Once you begin sketching your own plan here during this webinar, you might want to deepen your learning around other youth engagement fundamentals. So we are going to reshare at the end those 2 resources that I talked about, those 3 e-courses on the Prevention Learning Portal, as well as the YJAB Toolkit. The toolkit was developed by the PA Commission on Crime and Delinquency and the Juvenile Court Justices Commission. We use a lot of acronyms, so I'm going to do my best to read those things out through all 4 webinars and not just use acronyms, but if you hear me say PCCD and JCJC, that's what those reference. And that tool was created with input from existing youth justice advisory boards, or YJABs, across Pennsylvania. So without further ado, let's dive in to our first slide. I want to ground us in something important as we begin. I want us to think about youth voice operating on a spectrum. At one end of that spectrum, youth may provide input. In the middle of that spectrum, they can partner with adults. And at the highest level, they can lead with adult support. So none of this, we're going to ask for your input, and we're going to ask for, we'll do some polls and we'll gather some information on where folks are at. But really just want to make sure everybody knows this isn't about judging where your community is. It's about identifying where you are and where you want to grow and putting that together in a plan. So I just want to be clear, youth engagement in things like single events and creating activities for youth to participate in, even having youth plan activities for other youth to participate in, are very valuable. When youth plan events or they lead initiatives such as those events or one-time activities for other youth to participate in, it helps to build protective factors. It helps to strengthen opportunities for pro-social involvement, and that helps to support positive youth development. That work matters a lot. For the purpose of these 4 webinars, we're not going to be focusing on those kind of one-time events. Say you're doing, having youth plan an activity for other youth in your community. That offers all those positives that we were just talking about. What we've heard, and one of the reasons for building this 4-part webinar series is folks seem to be doing a lot of good work there in that area. What we have also heard is there's maybe some gaps that exist, and where folks have asked us specifically for help, and we've continually reheard, is how do we get youth voice and youth input on those larger, the community-wide decision-making processes. Things like community-wide strategic planning, getting youth input if you're reviewing your PAYS data, for example. So looking at those larger community-wide planning initiatives is where we're going to be for this 4-part series. Again, all of those other things, the activities, the one-time events, build great opportunities for youth. But I just want to ground us in the knowledge that as we talk through this 4-part webinar series, we're really focused on those larger community-wide strategic planning, prevention planning opportunities for youth to provide real input for communities. So for this webinar series, we're going to focus on things like youth serving on prevention coalition boards or other type of boards that your structure might have. Youth participating in committees with adults like the PAYS, whatever you call your process for analyzing your PAYS data every other year, that committee or work group. Youth contributing to community-wide strategic plans. Maybe youth advisory boards that have a defined set of influence in your community. And this is about thinking about that decision-making process where youth can have input. So think about, for a second, where are adults currently making prevention decisions in your community? What decisions are out there that adults make on behalf of youth that don't have youth present and or have youth input in the decision-making process? Next, think how youth might be integrated into those spaces, or how maybe a youth advisory board is created to be able to inform those decision-making processes that exist. And again, I want to reiterate this. Every community is going to look different. Everybody can be starting from a different place. Everybody can be finishing in a different place. This is really about building a process to get more input from youth on the decisions in your community and finding a structure that will work best for your community. So that is where the planning template will be helpful. We'll walk through that together through these 4 webinars to build something specific for you. So some of you may already have youth on boards, and some of you might be starting from scratch. The structures, barriers, readiness levels are going to vary across all of the participants on today's call, and I'm excited to see we have 81 of you plus Heather, Janine, and myself today. So I'm super excited that so many of you are interested in this topic and finding ways to get more youth voice in your prevention efforts. So everybody might be starting from a different place today. That's okay. Everybody, no matter where you're at, is invited to join this process, and we hope that you will find the process as we build a plan, regardless of where you're at, beneficial. Our goal across these 4 webinars isn't to tell you exactly what to do and prescribe one model. It's to help you design a structure that fits your capacity, your readiness, and your community context. So the first slide is some numbers. I like numbers, so we're going to start there. Heather and Janine and I were recently, we saw a presentation where the presenter was talking about the number of youth that exists across the world. And as we were pulling together some of this material, we thought that might be some good information to reshare out as we think about the number of youth and the value of that youth input. So if we zoom out for a second, fully 1/3 of the world's population is under the age of 15, is what was presented to us recently. And over half of all people on the globe are under 25 years old. That means that young people are not a small subgroup. They're not a niche population. They are not a demographic. They are, sorry, they are a demographic majority. By the time we finish this webinar, think about the hour that we're here for this webinar today, roughly. I won't keep you late, but we'll finish early if we're able to. But during that roughly 1 hour, approximately 15,000 new youths will be born. And that's new young people that will slowly be becoming the next generation of leaders in your communities. So this is why youth voice isn't optional. We're designing prevention systems, policies, and programs that affect a population that makes up more than half of the global community. So the question becomes, are they helping to shape those systems, or are we shaping the systems without them? And that's what today and the next 3 webinars following today are really about. Being intentional about how youth influence decisions, not just how they participate. I'd like to talk for a few minutes about some of the benefits of youth voice. We see 4 key things called out on the slide here: relevance, equity, trust, and outcomes. Let's talk about each of these benefits for a few seconds. For relevance, youth voice improves relevance. Prevention strategies only work when they reflect current realities. Youth know which substances, which substances are trending before they show up in your formal data, like in your PAYS data. The youth understand social pressure that may not be visible to adults. And youth can tell whether a message feels authentic or completely out of touch. I used to think I understood these things a little bit better, but as I get older, I realized, and as I was pulling some of this material together, there probably is a disconnect between what my views are and what youth feel is actually happening in their lives. Think about it from the youth perspective. When prevention feels relevant, when prevention feels relevant, engagement increases. And engagement is what allows prevention strategies to take hold. Without youth voice, we risk building prevention programs and plans for a version of youth that existed 5 or 10 years ago. So let's switch and think about equity for a second. Youth voice strengthens equity. Adults often make decisions using aggregate data, but youth bring insight into whose voices are missing, which groups feel excluded, where policies may unintentionally cause harm. When youth from diverse backgrounds are at the table, systems become more responsive. Equity isn't just about who we serve, it's about who helps shape the service. Youth Voice shifts prevention from being done to communities to being done shaping with them. We'll talk about trust next. Youth Voice builds trust, and trust is foundational in prevention. When you see that their feedback is acknowledged and implemented, their recommendations are taken seriously, they develop ownership, and ownership increases participation, ownership increases peer-to-peer influence, and ownership increases the community's credibility. Young people are far more likely to engage in prevention efforts that they help to design. Trust isn't abstract. It directly affects program participation and long-term engagement. Whenever I was pulling together the information for that in the part there about trust, I was thinking I've heard from many people, maybe some of you that are here today, about how challenging it can be to get families or youth to participate in certain programs or activities that you're trying to get them to engage in. If we're able to put together a plan that fits better for your community, we can increase trust, and trust should directly benefit things like program participation and that long-term engagement with all the efforts that you're trying to accomplish in your community. And working someplace like EPIS and under the Prevention Research Center, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about outcomes in some way. So finally, outcomes. When strategies are relevant, equitable, and trusted, your outcomes improve. Youth-informed prevention targets the right issues. Youth-informed prevention uses language that resonates with youth. Youth-informed prevention addresses real barriers, and youth-informed prevention builds buy-in from those most affected. This isn't about adding youth voice as a nice extra layer. It's about strengthening the effectiveness of your entire prevention system. As we go through the planning process together that we're going to start on the next slide and the next 3 webinars, please keep in mind, what prevention goals does Youth Voice strengthen? How will the leadership in your community understand the value of the increase in youth voice? And this will become the justification language for leadership buy-in that you'll use later for your plan. Okay. Now we're going to shift from thinking about youth voice in a conceptual manner to making it real. And this is where today's presentation sort of stops being more of a webinar and starts becoming about creating your plan. Before we talk about structure, recruitment, or sustainability, we have to answer some foundational questions, such as, why do we want youth voice? Not because it sounds good, not because it's trendy, not because funders are maybe asking for this, but because it strengthens prevention in a way that adult-only systems simply can't. That's a tongue twister. And here's why. Adults see patterns, adults see data, and adults see systems. Youth see lived experience in real time. They know which prevention messages feel authentic and which ones feel scripted, which policies are enforced and which ones are sometimes ignored. They know where risk is actually showing up, not just where we assume it is or where our data tells us it is. And they know how peer dynamics are shifting before adults ever even notice. When we exclude youth from shaping prevention efforts, we unintentionally design strategies based on interpretation instead of experience. And prevention loses precision. Prevention fails when it feels irrelevant to the youth. It fails when messaging doesn't resonate, when programs don't reflect real pressures, and when strategies are built on outdated assumptions. So getting more youth voice in our communities, hopefully through creating this plan in all of your communities, it strengthens equity by elevating perspectives that are often marginalized. And it builds trust because youth are more likely to engage in strategies that they help shape, which I think is also true for adults. But I think we sometimes miss that holds true for the young people that we're attempting to serve as well. So I want to have you think for a second before we dive into this. If somebody in your community leadership asks you tomorrow, why does this matter? What would you say? You don't have to answer formally or in chat or anything. Really, I just want you to take a second to think about how would you respond? Why is this important for your community? And with that, I'll give you a few seconds to start your planning template by documenting why do you want to engage youth in your community. So if you have any trouble with that document, this will be starting to use that planning template that Heather sent out about 40 minutes, I think, before the webinar started. If anybody's not able to access it, please let us know and we'll get that reshared with you. So as you're answering that question, take a few minutes to think about why does this matter? Why do you want youth engaged in your community's efforts? For the next question, do you come into this process with knowledge of any prevention goals or decisions in your community right now that you require youth voice for? Please document this in your plan. As you're writing your template, I want you to be specific for your community. What prevention goals, priorities, or decisions right now genuinely require youth perspective? If you're struggling to think of any on the spot, here are a few examples. Maybe our PAYS data is coming out in a couple of months. Maybe you would like youth participation to review that data. Maybe you would like their help with substance use prevention strategies being updated. Maybe you're looking at different mental health initiatives in your community that you need input from young people on, or school climate. Maybe you're looking at revising your strategic plan and you want to make sure that the perspective of those being served is included. So document those in your template. This grounds youth engagement in real prevention, not general ideals. Next, we want to think about what will youth actually influence, what can they actually, or what would you like to have them actually influence in your community? If youth aren't influencing real decisions, then we're talking about engagement here, not shared decision making. And for the purpose of this process, we really want to be in the space of thinking about shared decision making. How can we get the youth input into those decisions that are being made that impact your communities? And I want to encourage you to be as specific as possible for this section. And probably all sections of this template, the more specific you're able to be, the better the plan's going to be, and the more likely that you're going to be able to actually take action and put this in place in your community. So I want you to check all that apply in the next section, but also describe them specifically. For example, if you select policy, spell out what policy you would like their input on, or not just messaging, but for what campaign would you like their input on? The more specific that you're able to be, the better. If we're able to be very specific, it helps to prevent tokenism with our youth work. And the more specific you are, the more powerful that your plan will become. And just remember, this is a draft. Even if you're not finalizing this today, please check at least one of the structure options in section 2 that feels most right right now. You can always change it later. The act of choosing, even if you need to change it later, helps move this from an idea to taking tangible steps to put this in place in your community. And just as important, at what level will youth influence those decisions? You'll see 3 levels in your template. Input only, where youth share perspectives and adults make decisions. Shared decision making, where youth and adults will make decisions together. And youth-led with adult support, where youths will be driving decision-making process and adults will provide guidance and infrastructure to make that possible. As you look at these 3 options, just know none of them are inherently right or wrong. The key is to align your intention and your structure in your community. If youth are providing input, but they don't have shared authority, we should name that honestly. If youth are co-deciding, we need to think about what does that look like? Do they vote? For example, if they're on a board or a part of a committee, do they vote? Do they have equal numbers at the tables with adults? If youth are leading, what adult supports are currently in place or need to be in place so that the leadership doesn't become a token responsibility? So as you fill this out, I want you to think, if somebody in your community, a youth participant, asked you, do we actually get to decide, do we actually get to decide, or are we advising? How would you answer them? How would you answer them today? How would you answer them as you continue to refine this plan over the next 4 sessions? The level you choose isn't about ambition. It's about honestly assessing where you're at, where you can be, readiness, and accountability. And finally, think about the authority that youth will have in the plan. It's not enough to say that they'll be involved. What decisions can they actually make? Can they vote? Can they co-lead? Can they approve recommendations? Being clear about the authority that youth will have ensures that the engagement is real, meaningful, and will be trusted by the youth. As you fill out this section of your template and across the other webinars, keep in mind, how will youth experience the decision-making processes that you're designing for them? How will they know that their voices truly shaped outcomes in your community? So think about ways that you'll communicate those outcomes back to the youth in general. And if you can, I would encourage everybody to bring youth into the conversations for planning these processes in your community as early as possible. Planning together will strengthen the collaboration and ensures that this isn't just for show, it will be real for your community. Our next slide, some of you may have seen this image before, some of you may have not. This is Hart's Ladder of youth participation. And I have some more information on this if you're interested in learning more about Hart's Ladder a little bit later. So let's pause and reflect. Where are we at currently? Where are you at currently? There are no right or wrong answers. This is simply a chance to assess your starting point and any opportunities for growth in your community. This is Hart's Ladder participation, and this can be used as we think about, if we remember a few slides back ago, I was talking about there's that spectrum of ways to engage youth. For today's purposes, looking at this, we're not looking at those events or the activities that are created for the youth to participate in. We're looking at those strategic, this community-wide decision-making processes that determine things like what risk factors are you focusing on in your community, what evidence-based programs are you bringing to your community, your community-wide strategic prevention planning efforts. So, for example, if we were using this, and you can use this to look at those individual one-time activities or events that you plan with youth or for youth, and you might have 8 planned, and 8 of them might be at 8 different levels on this, and that's not right or wrong. That just shows that they all may be developed a little bit different with different levels of youth participation. For our purposes today, I want to put those aside and only look at those community-wide decision-making processes and how youth are impacting those in your community. So when you consider your current level of youth engagement, think about where youth are right now with providing input to things like your community board or with committees. Are they currently providing input? Are they not involved at all? Are youth leading those committees that inform your community decision-making processes? I'd like to do a poll to get us started here. And the first poll, a couple polls, we're going to do a couple of polls on this slide. The first one is going to be to look at where you're at right now. Really want to reflect on where are youth currently at, and if the honest answer is they're not involved in those community-wide decision-making processes, that's completely okay. Just mark to your wrong one when I bring up the poll for that one. But think about, for the first poll, where are you at right now? And then we'll look at where you want to be. So the first poll is Hart's Ladder, where you're currently at. I'm going to launch that and give you a few seconds to fill this in. Where are you currently at on Hart's Ladder for your community-wide decision-making processes? On my end, I can see the percentage of completed, so I'll give you a couple of seconds or until that percentage goes way up near full. So if you're able to, please select one of these that best represents where youth are at right now for your community-wide decision-making processes. It looks like we've got a lot of answers in. About 5 more seconds if anybody's interested in participating. All right, I'm going to hit end poll now and share results. So it looks like a lot of you, and again, this is no judgment. There's no right or wrong answers for these. We genuinely would like to understand from our end as facilitators for these next 4 sessions for Heather, Janine, and I, where's everybody starting at? And then the next poll we'll do will be to reflect on where you would like to aim for creating your plan and moving this to. It looks like the largest groups right now, if I can do the math in my head real quick, are about rung 1 and 3. 4 and 5 seem to be represented pretty well too, along with 6. I'm impressed. There's a few people up here on rung 7 or 8 that already have youth not just participating in those community-wide decision-making process, but if I'm understanding correctly your choices, having youth lead and direct some of those community-wide decision-making, larger strategic planning processes for your community. That's great. And wherever you're at on the spectrum, our hope is that by going through these 4 sessions and talking through this plan, wherever you're at on this, it will be strengthened. You'll be able to move your efforts forward wherever you want to go. So I'm going to stop sharing that. The next poll will be to think about the same question, but not where you're at. Where would you like to be? Let's say we create the best possible plan for your community. It might not mean that it takes you to rung 8. Your goals may look different. So the next poll we're going to be is if we're able to create this plan together for the next 4 sessions and we create a great plan, where would you like to move that to in your community? And be honest, we can't change the world in 12 to 18 months. Maybe you can. I can't. I'm learning that as I get older. But think about where you can possibly take your community to in the next 12 to 18 months. And I'll launch our second poll that will be to look at where you would like to be in the next 12 to 18 months. Okay, it should be launching now. This is looking forward 12 to 18 months. Where would you like your community to move to? And again, honesty is okay. If you're there right now and you say, you know what, I really don't see opportunities for this in our community, and you mark a 1 on this, there's no judgment. I think it will be really helpful to see just where your goals are, and then as we create the content for the following 3 webinars, this will help us to kind of meet you where you're at also. I'll give just a few more seconds. Sometimes I ramble during these polls, so everybody has a chance to fill them out. I'll give just a couple more seconds for everybody that would like to participate to fill this out, and then we'll see what our poll says. All right, let's check this out. So where we would like to be, this moved up considerably. Again, I see some very honest answers on here, and I sincerely appreciate that. That is exactly what we're asking for across this entire process is just honesty and transparency for us and for yourself and for your youth and your community. We had a number of higher responses around 8 and 7. The highest seemed to be around 7 and 8. 5 and 4 are pretty well represented, and that moved up pretty considerably from what we saw the first time. So I hope that that's helpful. Please mark this down in your plan too about where you would like to change your current state. And I don't remember if I gave you time. Let me stop sharing this poll. I don't know that I gave you a second to fill in on your template, but take a second to fill in this section where we look at where you're currently at and where would you like to move that to in your community. All right, I'm going to move us forward, but if you haven't finished that yet, please continue to fill that out. And if any of you would like to learn more about Heart's Ladder, we will be sharing, Heather and Janine are going to be sharing at the end. I have a few slides. We have a few slides in here about the 3 PLP courses that I'll talk to, and Janine and Heather will share the links in chat if I have that right in my head, or if I said it right the right way. Those 3 courses talk a little bit more detail about Heart's Ladder of Youth Engagement. Specifically, the second course goes into more detail with Heart's Ladder and its applications in your community. We'll share all of these links with you at the end, sort of right before Q&A, I think is where that part is. So now that you've drafted your purpose statement, and you've reflected on where youth can influence decisions in your community, the next step is thinking about how to structure their participation. Oh, I see that link was already put in chat. Thank you. Um, so we're going to move to section 2 of your planning template, and it's called structure decision. Think of this as a blueprint. What's the pathway that will allow youth to move from input to influence in your community? As the YJAB toolkit that I referenced earlier, and we'll reshare later, it emphasizes youth advisory structures must have, sorry, a clearly defined influence. Otherwise, they risk becoming symbolic rather than impactful. And I think if I can kind of reiterate something we talked about before, the last thing we want to do is for this to appear to just be a token activity to youth in your community. We want them to feel that they have real opportunities for input, regardless of what structure you select. So I want you to think about this. We would love to see youth integrated into existing boards and committees. The more that would give youth sort of that hands-on, direct involvement in decision-making processes. It might not be right for every community. So we want to have you think first about, can youth hold real seats on your existing board or boards or committees? So I'm going to launch us another poll. And this one is, can youth hold real seats on existing boards or committees? So I'm going to launch this now and ask you to participate. There's 3 choices here. Yes, they can hold real seats or boards on your committees. No, and we'd ask you to think about why not. And it might be that they can't for various reasons, but think through the why or why nots. And you might say maybe. And if you choose that option, we'd like to ask you to think about, how can you move this forward to decide if it's a yes or no? What supports are needed? What other information is needed either from teams like Heather, Janine, and I to provide you technical assistance on this, or input from your own community leaders or boards, whatever. Just think through what information or what you can do to decide whether this is a yes or no. All right, I'll give a couple more seconds for everybody that would like to participate to fill that in. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. I honestly didn't know what to expect here, so I can't say I expected or didn't expect this. I think it's great to see 40% said yes, youth can hold real seats on existing boards or committees. About 13% said no. And again, as we go through this process, this is going to be a draft for now. Some of you that said yes may determine later that there are barriers in place that you can't get around at this time. Maybe that's a goal for the future. Some of those yeses may move to nos. Some of those nos, as we look at barriers, may move to yeses, and those are completely okay. We hope that we can help across these 4 webinars move the maybes into one of those 2 buckets. All right. So if you selected no, if they can't, we want to think about things like, how do we get their youth in? How do we get their input to make decisions? Who will receive their recommendations? What accountability mechanisms exist to ensure that their input is considered? So if you choose to do something like a youth advisory board, how can we actually get their input? So want to take a few minutes to look at your options in the template and select the structure that you would like to move forward with. And again, you may select something today and decide later that that needs to change. You can always revisit it later, but we'll ask you to select one today that sort of fits your community best. And these options include youth integrated into an existing board or committee, maybe both, a creation of a youth advisory group, maybe a hybrid model that includes both. Maybe you'd like to see a youth advisory board, but you'd also see you'd like to maybe also see youth have real seats on those boards or committees as well. So that would fall under the hybrid model. Or there's another choice. So I'll ask you to fill those out on your template. Which one fits you best? And there's no right or wrongs. This is just what fits your community best to help you move forward with this. As you're filling that out, if you choose integrated board or committee, ask you to think through voting status. What What mechanisms exist for the voting that youth will have? Do youth have votes in the processes where adults have votes right now? Will there be term lengths? How long will you serve? And any other considerations that we'll need to think about to make this structure relevant. If you choose the creation of the Youth Advisory Board or group structure, think through who will receive their recommendations. How will the responses be communicated back to youth so that they know that their input is having real meaning and real value? What's the decision timeline? And of course, with that structure as well, any other considerations that might be relevant to that structure. There might be things that pop up later that you're not thinking of today. We'll just ask you to fill this in as completely as you can for today. And if you choose the hybrid structure, you'll want to consider both sets of questions, those for integrating youth into boards and also those for the creation of youth advisory boards. Remember, this is about feasible and meaningful engagement. There's no perfect choice, just the one that fits your community right now. Document your chosen structure in your template, and this is your plan for how youth will move from input to influence. And you can always revisit this as your plan evolves. This will help to guide the next sections on recruitment, access, and power sharing. So I want to pause for a second. I have just talked for a lot about youth engagement and these initial questions to consider for your plan. But I really want to highlight again, this wasn't just a webinar. You started building a plan if you were filling this template in as we go. Today, if you've done that, you filled in 3 foundational pieces of your youth voice implementation plan: a clear purpose statement, a target level of participation, and an initial structure direction. These aren't small steps. Many communities stay stuck in these conversations for months or years without knowing the right ways to take action to make this actually happen in your community. You've started to move that forward today by documenting your thoughts, even if it needs to change later. And as we've said, this is a draft. You've started those first steps. And this is how systems change begins. So if you look at your template now, you should see section 1 includes a draft purpose and your current state assessment. Section 2 has your initial thoughts on the feasible structure for youth participation. You may not have filled in every detail. That's okay. We would ask you to be as specific as possible, but if every detail isn't filled in, that's okay. This is still a working draft. The goal today was clarity, not perfection. If something feels messy or unfinished, that's expected. We're intentionally building this across 4 sections so that you have time to reflect on your ideas. You have time to hold internal conversations between these sessions, to refine your plan as you learn. And if I'm being honest, so you don't have to sit through one 4-hour webinar, because I know that an hour-long webinar is a long time, let alone 4. So we're breaking this up for all of those reasons into 4 sections. Today, you've laid the foundations for real change in your communities. And the next time we meet is April 9th. We'll get that information in later slides. But the next time we meet, we'll build on it with information on recruitment and access strategies to make youth engagement tangible. So deep breath. Let's change gears for just a few seconds. I highlighted throughout these slides a few resources that Heather and Janine and I have used heavily for the content in this webinar and the upcoming webinars. We want to share information on those resources with you right now so that you're able to, and look at that, Janine is ahead of me in chat. She already has these links for you. This is great. So in chat, you can see that these are the links for the 3 PLP courses, and I'll go through each of those in 3 quick slides to follow up. And then we have a slide to talk about the Pennsylvania Youth Justice Advisory Board Best Practices Toolkit. There are other resources that we pulled in today. You saw things like Hart's Ladder. These are sort of the things that we considered foundational building blocks for a lot of this material. These are all free. You can access all of these between sessions. You can explore them today. You can explore them in a month from now, whatever works best for you. But we hope that these will help fill in the gaps as we cover the materials in the webinars, and you can use these for additional learning and application in your community. So the first one is the first of those PLP e-courses on youth engagement that is called Coordinating Youth-Driven Work in the Community, Introduction to Youth Engagement. And it covers defining youth engagement and the role of youth prevention efforts, using the steps needed for successful youth initiatives, and identifying strategies for recruiting and keeping youth engaged. So we're going to talk about recruiting in the next webinar, Sun. If you would like a sneak peek, there's some information there on recruiting. Part two of three for that free e-course series, and these are all free, for the Prevention Learning Portal is called Coordinating Youth-Driven Work in the Community, Activating Youth in Prevention Work. I got to move my Zoom windows around to see all that. And its learning objectives are defining Robert Hart's 8 levels of youth engagement that you saw earlier in those polls that we did, identifying strategies to build youth skill set to advance prevention efforts, and identifying the benefits of youth having engaged, of having youth engaged in prevention efforts. I apologize. Part three is called Coordinating Youth-Driven Work in the Community, Sustaining and Advancing Youth Initiatives, and its learning objectives are identifying methods for evaluating effective youth engagement and understanding strategies for sustaining youth involvement in prevention work. The last of those resources that we will share today is this Pennsylvania Youth Justice Advisory Board Best Practices Toolkit. Its learning objectives are to define the purpose and core functions of a Youth Justice Advisory Board, describe the key practices for creating and sustaining a Youth Justice Advisory Board, applying strategies for meaningful youth engagement and partnership in juvenile justice settings, and to evaluate methods for measuring impact, ensuring long-term sustainability of youth advisory efforts. Okay, we have Q&A next, but I forgot to do something. I would like to back up if we can for just a sec, and this is mainly for Heather, Janine, and I. If we can get back to this slide, I had another poll that I forgot to do. We really wanted to see where you fell with the with your choice on there. Wrong slide. This one, where you chose the structure for your community. The choices were youth integrated into existing boards and or committees, the creation of a youth advisory board, the hybrid model. I would like to do a poll quickly to see where what you selected for your community. I'll open that now and give you a few seconds to fill that in. And again, there's no right or wrongs. We're just interested to see where everybody would like to take this. This may help us craft some of the content for the future sections as well as we see where folks fall with the structure they're selecting. All right, I still see responses coming in. I'll give you about 5 more seconds. End that and share the results. So these were pretty well split. If you remember the youth being integrated into boards or committees, we saw about 17% fall there. About 44% said they would like to create a youth advisory group of some type. And about 35% said they'd like to do both of those. 2% said none at this time, and 2% said other. So I appreciate everybody's responses there. All right, so if I move us back forward, I see we have about 11 minutes left. I'd like to allow about 10 minutes for Q&A to see what questions you have today. Maybe any questions that came up with helping to build your plan. We love to hear any aha moments, any maybe breakthroughs, something that we talked about today that you hadn't thought of if you've thought about this work before yet. There's absolutely no right or wrong questions. Everybody's starting from different spots, so we wanted to allow this time for your questions.
Jeff, we did have a question that came in from Maggie during your presentation, and she was wondering if you could give an example of each level of influence.
Example of each level of influence. Let me remember where we were at with that. These ones? No. What were our choices again for the levels of influence? I don't have the template up in front of me.
Let me pull that up here. Right. So I'm thinking that maybe this is around what decisions will youth influence?
Okay.
Um, and they are listed as program design, policy development, funding decisions, messaging and communications, evaluations, and other. And then it lists to describe the level of influence.
I think that gives you an opportunity to think through. So, is this an opportunity? And I brought this slide back up if I'm thinking along the right lines of your question. And if we miss the mark on your question for across any of these sessions, please let me know. Sometimes what I think somebody's asking isn't really what they're asking, but there's many different ways or levels that that information can be received. And I really liked starting with this slide as a grounding spot to understand that it might be that youth provide input and then adults make decisions. It might be that youth provide partnership where like so something I'm picturing in my head with the youth partnership is like youth and adults are in a room together making a decision together. The youth input is maybe more along the lines of that youth advisory board where youth are providing input to adults to help make a decision. And then the other possible choice here on the spectrum, at least, is youth leading those things with help from adults. And adults, we'll get into some things in the second and third webinars around youth learning to work with adults and adults learning to work with youth. But there are some groups that have provided opportunities where youth lead these decision-making processes, and adults help to provide sort of, for lack of a better term, like the guide rails for some of those decision-making processes, providing structure and support needed for youth to help make decisions, but youth providing input to adults to make decisions, youth partnering with adults in shared decision-making processes, and then youth actually leading the decision-making processes. And then we can tie that back in here again with Hart's ladder. It exists across sort of the spectrum, everything from and if you are interested in this, there's much more information about what does manipulate. I don't like the word manipulation. I look at the first level and I always kind of cringe when I say manipulation. But if you are interested, that second PLPE course that Janine, I think, shared the links for earlier, does go into more detail. What does that mean? What does that look like? And Heather and Janine and I are actually working on some other tools that will be on the PLP later. One that we're working on right now, if it ends up being a tool that gets put on there, is something that has what are some examples of what it looks like to be on each of these rungs, but then also what are some examples if, say, you're on rung 4 and you'd like to move to rung 5, what are some tangible ways that you can do that for your community? So we can think about the level of input operating across this spectrum as well. I hope that answers your question, Maggie. And if I can not make everybody dizzy, I'd love to go back to Q&A. Please let us know if we answered that or if anybody else has any other questions or thoughts or any aha takeaway moments, something that you didn't expect today. I always love hearing those. Hearing none, again, if you think of one, I'm going to take just a second and switch my screen and show you how to access those resources that Heather and Janine put in chat, and then we'll bring up our closing slides because I see we have about 6 minutes left. Usually I'm long-winded. I don't have a chance to do this, so I'm going to switch my screen just briefly and bring up the prevention learning portal for everybody. So if you'd like to learn more about this, those resources, and there are a lot more resources out there on this, on these topics, but the Prevention Learning Portal is the first one that we would direct everybody to, plp.psu.edu. If you go to e-learning, so there's several different sections up here. E-learning are our free e-courses. All the courses are eligible for Act 48 credits, and many are available for social work credits. It does require you to create an account. It's a pretty quick process to create an account. None of it has a cost associated with it. Creating the account is free. Taking the courses are free. Um, because we provide those credits, the credentialing system, we do have to require a login. So it's a short registration process to create your account, and then it's all free. But if you go to the e-learning page, you'll see if we scroll down just a little bit, there's a lot of good courses on here if you're interested in PAYS or if you're interested in how to engage community stakeholders or programs, logic model, all kinds of stuff. The three that we referenced today are part one, two, and three of this coordinating youth-driven work in the community series. So by clicking on those, then go into it, click Access Training, it'll take you to the page where you'll sign in for each of these courses. For the other resource, the YJAB document, if you go to our e-library, our e-library has grown by leaps and bounds and continues to grow. So there's a list view, there's some filtering options now. There's a lot of great resources on here that are all free for your communities. If you haven't checked out the Prevention Learning Portal, I would encourage everybody to do so. As I try not to scroll past this, if we go to P for Pennsylvania, they're alphabetical. The Pennsylvania Youth Justice Advisory Board Best Practices Toolkit is located here under the e-library. If you click into it, it tells you a little bit about the resource, and there's an Access Resource button at the bottom. It'll take you directly to that resource. So just wanted to make sure everybody had those, had knowledge of how to access those things if you'd like to learn more about this. So if I switch back to our slides, close us out.
Jeff, just a comment in
Mhm.
our Q&A. Heather wrote, we have a new advisory board for our youth space, but I realize it has more adult voices than youth. Moving to change that. We also just started a high school age leadership program, really looking at developing leadership and mentorship skills with high school youth, as well as developing their voice in our organization. Lots to think about. This is timely. Thank you.
That's great. And feel free, as we cover this content, there may be opportunities where you can provide some insight if you've gone through some of those, growing pains of getting that process started. Let Heather, Janine, and I know if there's anything that you would like to share as we cover some of these other topics in the template. This goes for anybody. We are down to 2 minutes, and I wanted to get through these next couple of slides, but I told you guys I was long-winded. Let me reshare this in the proper way. We are doing these 4 webinars, one each month for the next 4 months, well, the next 3 months now. And then our plan is to do a webinar monthly where we dive maybe deeper into some of these topics. Maybe we look at the areas that are more barriers or things like that. And we may be asking for some input from some of you who are doing this work to share that information. For good or bad, sometimes it's good to say, here's something that worked great in my community. Sometimes it's equally as helpful to say, hey, we tried this, it didn't work. So we may be asking for your input. If you have those things that you would like to share with us, we would love to hear from you, and we would love participants to be able to hear from you where the work is actually happening. Let us know that. We also are considering possibly doing some focus groups in between these things. So if you're interested in participating in smaller focus groups, please feel free to send me an email and I'll start compiling those lists so we can give opportunities. As we're talking about, if we're building structures for youth, getting youth voice, as Heather and Janine are building these structures to support you in your work, we would like to include your voice in this work as well as we build this. So this slide, just a reminder for everybody, this is part 2 of a 4-part webinar series. The next one is going to focus on recruitment, access, and inclusion, and it's called Pathways for Youth Participation. I think I saw somebody put the link for registration for that in chat. Janine's nodding, thank you. April 9th at 10 a.m. We hope to see you all back again. If you have questions in between, don't hesitate to reach out for us or to us. And my ending slide is just one thing to do. I always like to give one thing if I can for everybody to have one tangible thing to do so that this stays on top of your mind between webinars. So if you do nothing else before the next session, I encourage you to just have one conversation about the purpose you drafted today and not to finalize it, just to start shifting the dialogue. Culture change starts with small steps. By the end of webinar 4, this won't be just a concept. You'll have a completed youth voice implementation plan designed for your community. So keep building momentum, and we hope we will see you April 9th at 10 a.m. Thank you very much, everybody that joined today. As long as technology cooperates, we will be sending out this recording, and you should be getting some emails that also have the registration link if you registered for today. We'll see everybody April 9th. Thank you.